everyone, and welcome to another edition of Ascii Anything presented by Mosher Consulting. I'm your host, Angel Leon, Mosher's Director of Personnel. We're glad you're with us for this episode of Ascii Anything, where we'll be discussing the benefits of coaching. Now, we've discussed this many times in the past, and today we're bringing in David Bartholomew to get his insights on this topic and much more. David is a distinguished leader in change leadership and organizational behavior with over 3 decades of experience in strategic leadership transformation. His expertise lies in diagnosing and rectifying organizational misalignments, fostering collaborative cultures, and leading global change initiatives. David's credentials include a retired state psychotherapy license and certifications in areas such as organizational development, expert coaching, change management, and strategic leadership. Renowned for his ability to simplify complex challenges, David is a sought-after speaker and advisor, known for his insightful, transformative strategies in the world of business leadership and organizational effectiveness. Before we dive into the benefits of coaching, let's welcome our guest, David Bartholomew. David, how are you?
I'm doing great, Angel. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you. As I was reading your bio, I couldn't help but just really be in awe. 3 decades of experience in strategic leadership transformation. That's, sir, I got to tip my hat to you.
Thank you. I started when I was young, man, and it's been an amazing journey.
Well, we're glad to have you again. Thank you very much for joining us. So, as we often do here on Ascii Anything, we want to start with the basics. Every time we talk about coaching, we want to get the answer from everyone that we bring on to talk about it. And we want to ask you, why coaching? Why coaching? Why would someone seek out coaching?
That's actually an interesting question because, since COVID, we live in a world now where everybody's a coach. If you go on social media, you click LinkedIn. I think probably the first 50, messages you see are going to be from somebody who puts themselves out as a coach now. So that's always, I find that very interesting. And the other reality is people don't seek coaching as frequently as people think they do. For one, coaching is actually expensive in many cases. It's an investment. It's like going and get an education. It's an investment. And to get quality coaching, it doesn't come cheaply. And many people don't seek coaching until they're forced into a position where they're told they either need coaching or they find themselves in a situation where they're trying things that are not working, or they just don't know what to try anymore to make it or to get over that hump. So, people, to answer your question, people specifically, or people usually seek coaching when they're in a position where they're trying to achieve some type of a goal, trying to gain some type of advantage. And like I said, either what they're trying isn't working, or they just don't know what to try anymore and they're tired of losing.
I want to go back to what you mentioned about coaching being really an investment, because I don't think a lot of people view it like that. As I mentioned, we've talked about coaching here many times, but when we think about coaching, I'm going to use mentoring too, even though they're 2 completely different things. People just look at them and probably think about, oh, hey, I got this new coach. We're going to bring in this new coach, and they're going to coach our team managers, our first line managers, et cetera, maybe on how to have tough conversations, et cetera. And they just don't understand what they're investing in completely, because it's not just about doing that training, doing whatever it is that you're bringing them. It's about much more. It's about helping people grow.
Right. There's a lot to unpack there, Angel. I guess I'll approach it like this. The first thing to understand is that coaching is not training.
Right.
And many organizations, they use those terms interchangeably. Telling people what to do is not coaching. Progressive discipline policies in HR is not coaching. Mm-hmm. And all of these things are referred to as coaching. So I think part of the reason people don't fully understand that coaching is an investment is because within their organizations, they really don't know what coaching is. Very few organizations have actually had real coaches to come in and do the real work. What they usually do is assign somebody a responsibility to coach, or they hire new leaders and say part of your role is going to be coaching. They have no development around that, so they really don't understand the investment. So let's look at it from 2 perspectives. You have the individual perspective and you have an organizational perspective when you think about coaching. So if you think about what is the value of coaching as an investment, Coaching is about awareness and growth, or you can look at it as growth through awareness. I can train you to do pretty much anything, but coaching is where I help you develop the enlightenment to know yourself, where your gaps are. So if you think about blind spots, the most effective way to reveal blind spots is coaching. So people often say, I know my blind spots. And I say, well, it's not actually a blind spot if you can see it.
Yeah.
So when you think about coaching as an investment at the individual level, what you're really talking about is the fact that somebody realizes that there's something that's holding them back. They can't quite put their finger on it, but they realize that, they've been educated, they've been trained, they've been developed, and there's just something that either they're not quite getting there or they can just be much better. And those are people who will see coaching as an investment at an individual level. Organizationally, coaching is often one of the most misused leadership tactics I've ever seen within organizational settings. When coaching is actually implemented as an investment, it's usually on a strategic team when they have actual vision and they've identified key gaps within the organization directly related to people's capabilities and blind spots, and then they make the investment to bring coaches in to coach their leadership teams, coach individuals, maybe to coach high performers as part of the next generation of leaders within the organization. And those are really two key examples where coaching is actually seen and utilized as an investment.
There's a lot to unpack there. And I got to say, the two examples that you provided are right on point, because especially that last bit that you mentioned about bringing in a coach for a strategic team and just looking at from an objective standpoint, just not bringing in coaching, as you said, because coaching is not just training. It's not it. I agree with you 100% with everything you said. And that actually leads me to my next question, which you glossed over a little bit in your last response. So why do so many organizations struggle to implement coaching effectively?
Let's digress a second and talk about leadership.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about leadership, if you look at, I've been doing this a long time, and I've done this all over the world. And one thing I see everywhere I go is when I approach leaders, even at the senior and executive level, sometimes they're great visionaries, sometimes they're very strategic thinkers, but for many, many people in leadership roles, they've never been taught to lead. They were high performers at a very tactical level, and they come up through the ranks at a tactical level. And that's why many organizations actually seek people from the outside to come in and lead, not because they don't believe they have good people within the organization, but they often don't have strategic thinkers within the organization. They have people who can go out and execute anything at the drop of a dime, but they struggle to think strategically. So why is that significant? Because when you think about coaching, coaching is a key aspect of building leadership competency through self-awareness and helping leaders actually recognize the impact that they have on the organization and the impact that the organization has on them. And part of those leadership competencies include many aspects of developing people beyond their technical capabilities. And that's where coaching comes in. I have rarely seen someone fail at work or an organization fail because they lack technical capabilities. It's just the opposite. Every organization that I go in, many times they have amazing technical capabilities, and that's all they have. Mm-hmm. They don't have an understanding of, there's actually a dispute a lot of times that, that people try very hard to make a distinction between people's personal lives and their work lives. Who you are as a person, you bring that to work. And if that's very dysfunctional, if you struggle to stay engaged, if you struggle to remain aligned, if you're a troublesome person, you bring that to work. Coaching can help with that. It also can help from the standpoint of when people want to perform technically and they have to now engage cross-functionally with other leaders, they have to engage with teams, they have to get along, they have to play better in the sandbox. They have to take instruction better. They have to be more open, as we say, to coaching,
Right.
which is basically open to being given feedback. And, we spend a lot of time teaching our leaders and managers how to provide feedback. How much time do we spend helping people understand how to accept that feedback that they're being provided? We don't spend a lot of time talking about that.
No.
So these are all of the reasons or things that companies can do to improve their coaching culture that currently just don't exist.
I think that last part is a huge thing, and we see it probably every day as leaders, especially, I'm a people leader, where we get managers ready to provide feedback. Performance improvement, performance plan time comes around. All right, how do I do this? How do I tell this employee XYZ? Okay, you sit down with the manager and you explain how to basically state facts and how to try to remain between these boundaries, etc. But when it's the other way around, I was lucky enough when I started my career in HR 24 years ago, I had a good leader that taught me the awareness factor of being able to receive feedback, because he would always ask all of his employees, even those that didn't report to him directly, what can I do better to support you? What am I doing wrong that you can tell me without fear of retaliation or anything that I need to fix? And he was very blunt. If he was having a one-on-one with you, he would always end the meeting hoping for some feedback, whether it was negative or positive. Now, granted, if I had to put a number, 7 out of 10 people would give him positive feedback, and only really 30% would really tell him the real business. Hey, you probably need to fix this, maybe in your next town hall, those kinds of things. But it's hard because we don't prepare leaders to be ready to receive that negative feedback, because a lot of people are just afraid to receive negative feedback.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things to really look at in that, from the standpoint of receiving negative feedback, it's always interesting because when people actually get that feedback, it's not often that they don't want the feedback. They want the feedback, but they often want the feedback in a way that allows them to feel safe receiving the feedback, where they don't feel like the feedback itself is a threat to
Right.
their future, or a threat to their performance. Or, if you look at many, especially in production and manufacturing environments, many times these folks, this is the only job they've ever had or the only place they've ever been. Their family members are there, especially in some of the places I've worked, their community members are there, relatives are there. So, feedback gets around. You think it's a private thing when you're giving feedback. Within that next hour, everybody's going to know what feedback Joe or Susie received, and there's going to be a lot of reaction to that one way or another. And that person is often more afraid of that reaction and their reputation than they are of the feedback itself. So it's really important that when we're giving that feedback, we're understanding that as well. But even the feedback itself, the context of the organization is so critical. And that's a big part that's missed. And one day I was coaching a senior leader, and he was talking to me about the feedback that he was going to give one of his direct reports, a person right under the senior leadership team in the middle management. And as we talked, he sat with HR and they went through all of the technical ways to provide feedback, and is giving me the whole song and dance about, first I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to open up with this, and I'm going to say this. I said, so you seem to have thought through every single aspect of providing this feedback. I said, now, have you thought about how he's going to react when you say these things? Hadn't thought about that. I said that might be what you want to spend a little time thinking about. I said, because I don't think these things you're going to say are going to go over very well.
Yeah.
And that's really what, feedback is almost an introduction to the coaching process, because it often triggers coaching.
That's a good example, because there's two sides to every coin, right? And you can prepare as much as you want to provide that feedback, but if you're not prepared for what could come when you provide that feedback, that's really just as bad as you providing bad feedback.
It is. It has the same detrimental effect. It really does.
Yeah. So What does an organization need to have a successful coaching culture?
So when you think about culture, I mean, culture comes from leadership. That's what the culture, we can debate this all day long. I hear people always wanting to talk about these different nuances of culture. The reality is you can take any sports team and see them change a coach and see what happens to the culture almost immediately. And it's the same thing within organizations. You know, once you have the leadership team in place, it's critical that they really understand what type of culture they're trying to create, because your actions then either align or misalign to that culture that you're trying to create. And so when you think about what leaders need to do to actually create that culture, it needs to be in, I guess let's back up a second. Let's talk about what is culture, because that's really, talking about culture is just as misunderstood as talking about leadership and coaching. Culture is not about your policies and procedures. It's not about your directives that come from HR. It's not about the training you provide. Culture is, I'm going to give you a very simple definition of culture. Culture is when people pull in that parking lot in the morning, are they excited to get out of the car and go in that building? Or do they dread getting out of the car and going to that building? That's what culture is. That's a very simple way of looking at culture. And the way leaders handle their workplace has a lot to do with that feeling. And we can all relate to that definition. Very simple to understand. And so the question then becomes, if that's how we're trying to get our people to feel, with the understanding that if they feel that way, they're going to produce in ways we can never legislate and we can never control, then how do we create that? And for every organization, it's different. If your leadership team is counteractive to that, then you need to look at your leadership team. If you have a leadership team that is very solid and people love showing up at work to see those leaders, but then they don't like the job, then you look at your policies and procedures. You look at your HR team. You look at whether or not your middle managers and frontline managers are on point. And that's where coaching really makes a difference, because you can have amazing coaches at the senior level, but if it does not make its way down to the frontline supervisory level and they have no idea of how to lead and how to coach, then that's where your breakdown really happens. And in reality, that's a lot of where people hate going to work, what actually happens at that frontline supervisory level. So to build that solid coaching culture, you need to make sure that through all layers of leadership within the organization, that they are trained to coach, they know how to coach, they know how to give and receive feedback, they understand things like engagement, they understand how to get people aligned, and they're well developed on those things as much as they are developed on the technical skills required to do their jobs. And if you focus on those things and start with an assessment, pulse surveys, real ways of really learning where people's heads are around their work, then you'll be on your way to developing that culture.
I've always thought that first line managers have probably the toughest job in any organization. I mean, just because they are sandwiched in between their employees, the people that report to them directly, and then the people that they report to, that, depending on your organization, could be 2-3 deep to the CEO, or maybe you are close to then a VP and then the CEO. So you've got a lot of trickle down communication that sometimes get lost in translation, or if it doesn't get lost, it doesn't get communicated correctly. And that's probably the hardest job of a first line manager, is to make sure that that they're getting the right information to communicate to their people, and B, that they're well informed of whatever change is happening in the organization. Because you're right. I mean, coaching, I've always found it key that when an organization brings in a coach, I get it. Sometimes we think top down. I think we should think bottom up, because those people right there as a frontline manager are as important to that culture that you were describing. If I'm an employee and I'm sitting in that parking lot and I feel like, do I really want to come to work today because I've got Bob to deal with? Or do I really want to go to work because I got Bob to deal with? He's fun. I like Bob because Bob gives me feedback, several times throughout the year. He's always looking out for me. When I've had issues that I've come to Bob, he fights for me. I get it. And when there's big things coming down from the top of the organization, Bob's always there to explain and answer my questions. I think that to me has always been a key part of any organization, is that frontline manager.
There's a ton of research around frontline managers that many people have probably not taken the time to really look at. One of the things that the research says is that the frontline manager is one of the roles within a company that has the highest demand, the greatest pressure, and they are the least developed group within the company. And part of the excuse, and again, at pretty much every site that I've been at, is they don't have time to leave the line. We don't have time to train them. We don't have time to develop them. And then my response is, then you get what you get. Don't be surprised that there's no growth and development if you are unwilling to make that investment and you have excuses about, why you don't make that investment. Now, obviously, it is more difficult to get a frontline leader or frontline manager, whatever they call it in the organization, off the line to do the work, but it can be done. In every single organization I've been in, I've helped them to do that. The second part that is really critical to what you were mentioning, though, Angel, is that when you think about the front line and you think about what it means, I call that a gateway role. That's that role. I mean, when a person first gets that role, they are so excited. They just love they have worked hard to get there. Many of them, that was their dream. Their dream was to become a frontline manager. I mean, that especially if they came in as a mechanic or as an operator, working on the front line, and then they end up making it to that supervisory level. I mean, that is absolutely a win for them.
Yeah.
And that's where they either get on a trajectory of becoming an amazing organizational leader, or they become a critical part of the problem. And it will have everything to do with how they are treated and developed at that level. If they happen to be in a place or in a position where, as you said, somebody takes them under their wing, they coaches them well, they communicate well with them, they teach them about the importance of how you deal with your people, they teach them about the organizational and leadership aspects as much as they teach them about the structural and mechanical aspects of their work. This is a person who's on their way. But a person who comes in, do what I say, not as I do, that they're not developed. They come in with that command and control mindset, or that's what they're taught. The only thing you need to do is what I tell you to do, because your coaching comes in your paycheck, which is what I've heard directly. That tells you, unless this is a very strong personality who knows better, and they can fight against that. But the reality is, many of these people learn that it becomes entrenched in them. And in that type of toxic organization, which there are more than most people probably realize, that becomes what is accepted. That becomes what not only is accepted, but what is promoted. So that's what they begin to deliver on.
And that's the sad part, because as you said, a lot of people that take on those first line manager jobs, they're either excited because they really wanted to be a manager at some point in their life, or that was their dream, as you said. And so for them to go in there and now step into a role where their next manager up is an A or a B, and if it's a B, then good luck with the rest of your career, because it's not going to bode well for you. And that's sad, because it just breaks someone down to a level, like you mentioned, it makes him part of the problem. It just makes him another cog in a system that should have been fixed or should be running a lot smoother and better. So speaking of disengaged people, how can someone like you, for example, work with a disengaged coachee? Like, how does that work?
A big part of it is really taking the time to understand what makes this person disengaged. Sometimes we're quick to jump on definitions. I know that Gallup has done a ton of research around engagement, and going everywhere from being actively engaged to disengaged to actively disengaged, and then on their way out of the door, basically. But even with that, you really have to know what you're doing and who you're dealing with. So part of the coaching process is when you actually say you're going to coach someone, that means that you have to coach someone who is willing to be coached. You cannot coach an unwilling participant. That's called discipline. Okay, that's not called coaching. So for all you HR leaders who are listening, if you coach an unwilling participant, that is not coaching, that's discipline. So when you actually go to coach that person, I mean, I can give you some very specific examples. I'll give you one that always, I mean, this one just remains close to my heart. This was about 5 years ago. I was at this large, it was a global company. I was at one of their major production sites, and there was a manager there who it was a young lady, and it was, the mindset of the company was, if she doesn't start doing the things that we have set out for her to do, she's going to be out the door. She's completely disengaged. She used to be really engaged, and I don't know what's happened, but she's not engaged, and we're moving forward. If she doesn't get it together, we're moving past her. And so I went out on the floor as a coach, and she was unplugged. I mean, it was obvious she was unplugged. And so I said, okay, the first thing, this was a production floor, and I went and found the dirtiest desk in her area, and I sat at that desk. That's where I made my home, just to signal to her, I'm not here above you. I'm here to help you. And so once I did that, she took notice, which I figured she would. And then as I began to just watch and listen, I didn't talk. I just watched and I listened. What I began to see was she was one of the strongest informal leaders they had on the floor. It was obvious to me she is not disengaged. She's actually extremely engaged. She's disengaged at the senior leadership level and at the organizational level. But on that shop room floor, she is the one. So what's going on here? What's happening here? Because obviously, no one else took the time to see what's happening on the floor. They made the judgment based on her responses to what they were telling her to do at the leadership level. This could be a very long story, but I'm just going to fast forward. The bottom line was a new manager had come in, and he was right in what he was doing. He was taking a very good approach. He wanted to get his managers and his frontline supervisors more involved in reporting, which meant they had to start understanding and reading data. They had to start using computers more frequently, and I think you know where this is going.
Yep.
They had to start making reports to the senior leadership team, all of the things she had never, ever done, On top of that, she came from a family where most everyone worked at a very technical level. They did their job. They did not have leadership roles or positions. So she had no one to consult about these things. And so it was fear. She was afraid. I mean, she had developed this relationship with her team members. She had developed this reputation within the organization. And now she was being put in a position where she felt she was being set up to fail. So where it appeared that she was disengaged, she in fact was afraid of failing if she grew and took on additional responsibilities. So she essentially shut down, and no one took the time to really kind of engage her. That was one of the reasons they brought me in, is because one person recognized that there may be something more that's going on there. And so, basically I taught her to read and understand data, taught her to make reports. I taught her to do basic PowerPoint presentations. And at the first meeting where she was now scheduled to go and do her report out to the senior leadership team, and to some people listening, this may sound like such a simple thing. You just, what's the big deal? You stand in front and you just say what you have to say. They can't understand if you're that person who has never done that and is terrified of doing that. She literally held my hand as she stood there and did her report out. And the leadership team respected that. They understood that, and they didn't challenge her as a result of that. She kept me literally right next to her as she did the report. She knocked it out of the park. Now, real quick, about 2 years after that, I was in San Francisco at a conference, and I saw that the manager, I saw the senior leader who had, basically gotten the help for her. He said, I don't know what you did, but now she's holding me accountable to, to make sure that I do things right in the company. That's what one example. Now, if there's someone who just does not care about the job, there's not a coaching won't work, training won't work, any other. There are some people who are just poisonous and toxic and have no interest in doing anything beyond what they do. And those people, there's a place for them too.
And that first story you mentioned, it's interesting because she already had a standing in her own mind and really across the floor from what you say. But once they put her to do something different, once they basically changed her, I don't know, trajectory, her objectives, if you will, then they kind of just, okay, no, this is not what I'm trying to do. This is not what I want to do. I want to keep doing what I'm doing. And so she kind of locks. And then when she gets you, she starts blossoming. She sees the potential of the things that she can do. And then that finale of the story of the manager just telling you, yeah, she's holding me accountable now. That's great. That's a great story of success, of you seeing somebody through that was blocked mentally, probably, in that I was just set in my ways. This is what I'm doing here. And for this person to come in and trying to hold me accountable and kind of, I don't know if renew is the right word, but basically renew my role just from a different perspective and make me more accountable to these other individuals. Like, that's not what I want to do. That's a great success story. Thank you for sharing that. That's pretty awesome.
One of the things that when I talk about coaching, I try to think of simple ways of describing things that everyday people can see them, and it doesn't sound like a bunch of fluff and pomp and circumstance. Just like I have my definition of culture, when I think of coaching for me is simply the ability to help somebody go somewhere that they either can't go on their own or won't go on their own. Mm-hmm. That's what coaching really is all about. Coaching is really about helping that person tap into something inside themselves, just decide that it's okay for them to take that step to that next level. It's okay to even go to that next level and not do well. And now we get into the whole conversation about empowerment, because I really believe that coaching is a key mechanism for helping people become empowered.
Mm-hmm. That's what you did in that example. So congratulations. That's an awesome story. So David, before we go, how can Mosier and you help with coaching?
I think one of the things that I love about Mosier, and it's how I kind of got close to Mosier, is there are a lot of companies out there that do assessment. There are a lot of online tools. I mean, people tell me all the time about they went online, they took a DISC assessment, they've done Myers-Briggs, they've done all of these other assessments. But rarely do you find a company that does assessments and really understands the human side of those assessments and the realities of, when I sit down to give somebody these results, what does that mean to them? And what is the impact that has on them? And, to actually take the time to help them understand that. That's one of the things that I love about Mosier. And when you think about it from the standpoint of what they can do, there is so much value in some of the abilities to assess not only individuals, but the team, an entire leadership team, and then be able to provide them the insights to know, these are some things to consider as you attempt to grow. And in terms of for myself, I mean, I'm really just a person that helps people to elevate to the next level. I do that at individual levels. I do that at organizational levels. And I've been through every phase of that journey, from the coaching to the organizational development aspect of it, to the leadership aspect of it. And my actual expertise is in helping leadership teams get coached through transformational and change processes. And that's really where, coaching is fundamental, because, when you start encountering that type of fear and that type of resistance to change, which is often rooted in that fear, coaching is a very key mechanism for helping people to move beyond that. And the funny thing that often happens is, once they get past the sticking point, Now they're like, well, wait, can I get some more of this?
Right.
I want to continue growing. I'm seeing the value and benefit in my career and in my life as well. So, that's the best way I can tell you that both Moser and myself could be of value in that process.
Well, David, it's been an honor and a pleasure to have you with us today on Ascii Anything. Thank you once again for the insights on coaching, and we'd love to have you again. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me, Angel. You have a great day.
Thank you for listening in to this week's edition of Ascii Anything presented by Moser Consulting. We hope you enjoyed listening to David Bartholomew talk to us about coaching. If you have any coaching need, please reach out to our Learning Services Department here at Moser Consulting. You can go to our website, www.moserit.com/learning to learn more. Join us next time when we continue to dive deeper with our resident experts and what they're currently working on. Remember to send us your ideas or topics via our social media feeds. In the meantime, please remember to give us a rating and subscribe to our feed wherever you get your podcasts. Until then, remember, it's not a blind spot if you can't see it. So long, everybody.